Welcome to part 2 of the miter saw station build. If you'd like to see how I got up to this point, go ahead and check out part 1. I'll leave a link to that video in this description. I came across a couple of old desktops, and being that they were free, I figured why not use them for the top. I simply peeled off the plastic edge banding, and I figured I was going to put my own trim on it anyways. I'll be using the biscuit joiner to cut some slots in the tops themselves and also on the piece of wood that I'm going to be using as a trim. After cutting all the slots, I'll apply some glue, the biscuits, and clamp everything down. I didn't have enough clamps, so I had to get a little creative. But in the end, everything worked out. I'll use a trim router to round over the edges. Prior to securing the countertops, I ran dust collection pipe. I installed this small blast gate and gave it a test run. After securing the tops from the underside, I wanted to give the cabinet some type of protection while I worked on the rest of the build. I gave it a quick coat of finish and continued on to the drawers. Since I had 25 drawers to make, I wanted to set up somewhat of an assembly line, and hopefully this would speed up the process. My drawer construction is going to be fairly simple. I'll drill a couple of pocket holes in the front and the back of the drawer. I'll apply some glue and drive a couple of 1-inch nails. Now I can flip the drawer over on its side and apply some glue. I'll shoot a couple more nails and flip the assembly over. Now I can attach the last side. A couple of 1-inch Craig screws finishes everything off. And I just have to repeat the process 24 more times. It would have been a lot easier to install these toe kick drawers prior to attaching the cabinets to each other. Since I forgot to do that, I'm having to lay down on the ground, and this is my process. I'll use a piece of plywood and add a couple of shims to hold it in place. I'll also add a couple of scrap pieces of plywood perpendicular to the first one. I'll set the drawer in place and use a spacer until the drawer is parallel with the drawer slides. In my case, it was a measuring tape. I'll start from the rear of the drawer and I'll add 1 screw on each side. I'll slide the drawer back. Now I could add a couple more screws to the front end of the drawer. Now I could remove the entire drawer and add a couple more screws and then slide it back into place. The rest of the drawers went pretty easy compared to those. For the drawer fronts, I'll be using 1x2 pine with a plywood insert. After cutting all my pieces to size, I drilled one pocket hole into each end of the rail. To save a little time on setup, I'm clamping both rails at the same time. I'm using a piece of plywood to apply even pressure to both pieces. After I applied some glue to the ends, I clamped everything down and secured everything with 4 screws. I made all my drawer fronts oversized about 1/16 of an inch. This way I can take them back to the table saw and get a perfect fit on each individual drawer front. I'll need to cut a rabbet on the inside of the drawer front to receive the plywood insert. And I meant to do this prior to assembly, but I got carried away. I'm getting it done at this stage, but I made sure my router bit would not come in contact with any screws. Since this is only pine, I did apply 1 coat of pre-stain. I wanted a little bit of contrast between the drawer front and the face frame. I'm using provincial stain made by Minwax, and although I like the color, I thought it was just a little bit too dark. I'll make it a little lighter by adding mineral spirits. To install the insert, I could either take a chisel and square up the corners, or I could make the corners of the insert round. Since this side will not be visible, I opted out for the belt sander and rounded the corners. This saved a lot of time. I set the insert in place and drove a couple of nails just to hold everything in place while the glue dried. After cleaning up the glue squeeze out, I used a couple of coats of Armor Seal to finish everything off. I thought about making my own drawer pulls, but then I remembered I received a decent amount of drawer pulls about a year ago. The person that gave them to me had no use for them at the time, and I stored them away and completely forgot about them. I cut a piece of paper to the exact dimensions of the front-facing insert. I'll fold the piece of paper to find the center. Then I'll measure the distance between the 2 hole centers. I'll split that measurement in half and make a mark on each side of the paper. With the template made, I could drill all the necessary holes on the drawer front. Now that I've drilled all the holes for the drawer pulls, it's time to install the drawer fronts. I used some old playing cards to get an even gap all the way around the drawer front. To hold the drawer front in place, I drove 2 1-inch nails in the holes I drilled previously. I pulled the drawer out and secured the drawer front from the inside of the drawer. Now I could remove those screws in the front side and drill a hole completely through the drawer. And finally I could install the drawer pull. I'm really happy with the location of the dust collection blast gate. To make it look as good as it functions, I made a false drawer front by attaching a hinge to a piece of pine. Make sure to share this video, it really helps me out. Be sure to subscribe and come back for part 3 where I'll add a dust hood and a fence system.